The meeting.
Yeah, call the meeting to order and welcome her to the City of Kalispell's Council Work Session for July 22nd, 2024. Can I have a roll call?
Councillor Hunter.
Here.
Councillor Nunnally.
Here.
Councillor Carlson.
Here.
Councillor Gabrielle.
Here.
Councillor Graham. Councillor Dowd.
Here.
Councillor Dahlman.
Here.
Councillor Fisher. Mayor Johnson.
I'm here. All right, discussion. We have one item for discussion this evening, Sidewalk and Trails Assessment District. Mr. Russell, do you want to give us an intro on this?
Yeah, Mayor and Council. During our budget workshops, part of the discussion veered over to, sorry, I sound like a little bit of an echo, the potential Trails Assessment District. A little bit of talk, we've revisited a couple times in the past. So it was just requested to be brought back again as part of this year's budget topics in case it's one that council wanted to move forward with in this next fiscal year to add funding to the budget for an election and or educational campaign related to it. So in the memorandum, basically the same materials that I put in last time, the pedestrian and bicycle plan, that was part of the DOT transportation plan, and then also a table identifying how assessment district could work in terms of appropriation and use of potential funds. And can we pop that up on the screen, Amy? So I'll just briefly go over that. And really what we're looking for today is just general discussion by governing body. We don't have to make decisions tonight because, it'll come back for potential action when the budget's presented in August and, if council wants to add to it, but can definitely have that discussion tonight. But essentially what I did in terms of the budget is just really tried to identify, what assessments could look like, how much that would bring in, how they could be divided. And I able to, change various things with the percentages here tonight if council is interested in looking at it. But, just as a baseline, this bottom section identifies potential assessment per square foot. For perspective, the 0.00470025 is what our current forestry assessment's at. And this is right below it is what the different cost implications are for different classes of property. So for average residential, the current forestry is about almost $42 a year. And then you see the different levels through that, just through and a sampling, obviously double it, add whatever, we can make changes. And then not only do we have what the class implications are per parcel, but for each assessment level, how much that would bring in total revenue funds. These are actually a little bit low than what we anticipate through there because, we're working on averages, but I think this year we looked at around 650,000 estimated for the forestry assessment based off previous numbers and the annual estimated increase. So anywhere between this number, 650, somewhere in that ballpark. So it's good enough just to have a general idea in terms related to it. But then I took this total amount generated and in this level basically broke down to, percentage allocation and, how much dollars that would be. Again, we can change this and then have an automatic change on the top table, which is what we would receive in terms of outcome at these various percentages. For, this current forestry assessment based on these percentage allocations, you're looking at 2.5 blocks of sidewalk with curb and gutter, almost 2.5 of just sidewalk replacement, almost a block of connecting trails, et cetera, et cetera. And, some of the components with this is obviously if you have a dedicated revenue source, you could bond off. So you wouldn't have to generate all that amount. If we had a big, say, connecting trails project, we wouldn't have to bond off of, or you could bond off of it over a 10, 20-year period and use that revenue to support it or save up with a pay-as-you-go type avenue or a pay-as-you-use, either one of those factors. But anyway, just gives a general idea to start the discussion off. We're still somewhat early in terms of what that would look like, but if council does want to move forward, with the potential district and go out to the voters on it. I was just kind of thinking ahead of, preparation for that. And one thing, that I would recommend we do is at that point, and how it differed from the fire EMS levy to this one, is maybe create a subcommittee of council, to be that driving component in terms of, aiding with messaging of how we're developing it and some of the different parameters, with the fire and EMS levy. Somewhat was internal, and we had the objective third-party review that created a lot of that messaging, but I think it'd be a good idea on this one, if we go forward in that avenue, to have a subcommittee that includes maybe 3 council members to work with staff in terms of what that message would be, or outreach related to it. So again, nothing needs to be decided tonight, but just thinking ahead of what those potential next steps could be for an effective process as we, if we so choose to move forward with that. So with this, happy to answer questions. Obviously, we have multiple staff here related to different components of the project itself, but happy to answer questions council have and turn it over to council for leading the discussion.
Okay. Mr. Minley?
So that, you said that's the average of the house, so on residential it'd be $42, but what's that average? Is that for 100,000 or is that
It's not per value, it's per square foot.
per square foot?
Yeah,
Okay,
so the forestry is not based on home valuation.
okay,
based on square
okay,
footage.
you're right, yep.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Howard. Yeah, so just to kind of summarize some of my thinking of this and why I support going forward with the levy and what I'd like to see that look like. Just with the EMS levy, that was all about safety, and I think the community supported it because of the safety, police and fire. I very much view this in that lens as well, that sidewalks and bike lanes and traffic calming is a safety issue as well. And when I go out in the community and talk to folks, I hear a lot from folks that they want to see more investment in sidewalks and these things. It's also, you hear a lot about traffic and reducing traffic in the community, and that's hard to do in a growing community with ever-growing population and development. And I'm a true believer that the only way you reduce traffic congestion is by providing folks with alternatives to vehicle travel for those who are interested in pursuing that. So this would be towards those ends as well. One of the things that really got me thinking about this, about the need for this, I mean, in greater detail, was last year when the 8th Avenue West project, and we did that road reconstruction project, and there was reconstruction of sidewalks that were disturbed or whatnot, but there were missing segments of sidewalks. And I inquired, well, aren't we putting in sidewalks where there aren't sidewalks since we're already there doing all the street work? And we weren't. And the reason is because the funding to fund that project wasn't allowed to be used for new sidewalks. And that's just a waste. I mean, that's just a missed opportunity. Obviously, not our fault, the funding source coming from the federal state level. But I would really hate to see that moving forward in the future, that if we're already there doing work and there needs to be sidewalks, that we have some funds we can tap to put those sidewalks in when they're missing. So that's sidewalks, and I know this example is focused on sidewalks, and maybe that's kind of where the discussion has been in the past. As I've said in the past, I would like to see it a bit broader. I think bike lanes are just as important. I think traffic calming. I've heard a lot of that in the community, people wanting traffic calming. Both of those are the same thing where there isn't dedicated funding for those type of projects. Especially with street funding that comes in, it's just not there's not any ability to use those funding for sidewalks, bike lanes, and traffic calming. Traffic calming, I think, is an important one because there may be some folks who use their vehicles and they have no interest in sidewalks and bike lanes, right? And they may not support a measure just for that. But traffic calming is something that I think maybe has a little more broader support. And so I'd like to see that included. So you'd have to, I think, go a little bit bigger than this. So you have some funds where you can do a little bit of a mix. Obviously, it spreads the money a bit thinner. But also thinking about the Main Street Safety Project that we just reviewed. Well, I was absent, but I did watch the video. Lots of great ideas, and also in our transportation plan for sidewalks, for bike lanes, for traffic calming. I imagine when we go for grants for that, I think this was mentioned, that if we have some local match, that will help us in being able to obtain some grants for implementation of Main Street Safety Plan, if that gets adopted. So I think it'll be really important. This is good timing to get this in place so that we can go for those grants for a lot of those great ideas and big projects in the Main Street Safety Plan. So I'm all for it. I think it should be a little bit bigger, a little bit broader, but that's my case for it.
Mr. Dowd?
Yeah, so when I read this earlier, I was a little confused why we have the current forestry thing. I think you're just giving us an example of we have an assessment set aside for that, and if we did it at the same exact level, this is what we would get. Okay, just making sure. I think, you know, I agree with a lot of what Mr. Hunter said, but this is a terrible time to add anything to the cost of the government here. People are already being really squashed by just our normal operations have become more expensive, and I mean we're fighting really hard to keep the number of mills we levy down as much as we can, and we'll see how that turns out with the budget session. But when I'm looking at the benefit, so you have 2.41 blocks of curb and gutter. If we did that, that would take the entire fund. Is that correct? That would,
No, that's,
or all of these things together would take the entire.
yeah, each option has how much of each one you could do under this allocation.
Okay.
So like,
Gotcha.
say, you could change this to 100%,
Yep.
then you do 5.5 blocks.
Okay. I got you. All right. Thanks for determining that for me.
And
But
now I have no idea what they were. Yeah, I'm working on it.
anyway, so that's my thought. Is these are
What's that?
great things because when
Oh,
we build a new
you.
development, we put this cost on the developer. But this is for the existing stuff that was created before those were city standards, and we have a lot of streets, especially in the near downtown area, that don't have sidewalks or boulevard or gutter, right? And when we do go and work on them, it would be nice that if at the same time we could do these things and give a sidewalk to people that have never had one before. I'm just really cautious about the cost, and even if you're only talking, $40 for a residential customer, I mean that's $40 on top of the water increase we did, on top of everything else that we have raised this year due to inflationary costs and stuff like that. So I'm very cautious with this. I would like to see what it looked like. And obviously, we're not just going to do it. We're bringing this to the people. And that's the part that I appreciate, is let them decide whether we're going to do this or not. But I would be, you probably don't want me on that committee. I'll just put it that way.
Sid, I want you on every committee.
Ryan?
Yeah, and just respond, I agree with you in terms of the timing. It's not a great timing. And I've been sensitive to those other areas going up as well, as you know. But the truth is that I've been on council almost 5 years now. I've been looking for the right timing for this, and it's never been good timing. So I'm kind of like, after seeing the EMS levy go through, it wasn't good timing for that either. Obviously, that's a different issue, but that gave me hope that, when you make the right ask for the right thing, our community can deliver, and I do think this is the right thing. It's the right ask, so I'm concerned about the timing, but I don't see a good timing moving forward. It's always going to be the wrong time. So that's all I could do on pitching the timing.
Hey,
Okay.
I got a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Jessica.
So, I really can feel both of those sentiments. There's never going to be a good timing, and this is just really very bad timing. My notes to myself is just I'm reticent to really just assess anything new because of everything else. But like Ryan said, there's just really no good timing. And, to put this in front of the voters is something I also really appreciate. Just a quick question about that. Now, if and when we did put it in front of the voters, I mean, how would it be proposed? Is it like, do we just give them one option? Do we give them several to choose from?
No,
How
it'd
would
be,
that
it'd be one option.
One option. So we would be, choosing, basically from, kind of the outline that you gave us in that table.
That's just for discussion. You could
Just for discussion.
double
sure.
it, triple it, half it, any of those. I just wanted to give, a variety of options. So you could even look and add two of them together if you wanted, just to see what that would be. Or if you want, I can do some quick calculations on different things. But again, if council wanted to move forward, that's what I would envision, that committee working toward, a formal recommendation to council of what option they think would be best. And just like council deliberated the last time, council went above and beyond the recommended option that we provided, and it worked out great. And I'm very thankful that that's what council's deliberation led to. So I would envision, again, that committee coming up with a recommendation for the full council deliberate, and then if that's the decision, move forward in that fashion.
And, I know y'all just touched on this twice, but I'm still, okay, so current forestry means that that's what is assessed for our trees, correct?
Yeah, our urban forestry district is set at that assessment amount. So I just used it for a, relative understanding of, okay, what would that mean? That's what we do for forestry, that 0.00470025 per square foot. What's that translate to for the average homeowner? So that's just why we use that as that option 3. Doesn't mean that's what we're recommending or not recommending. That just tries to put it in perspective according to one of our other assessment districts.
Yeah, because there's a pretty big difference between like option 1 and option 2, less and less a difference between option 3 and option 4. And I think that if we're gonna, put anything toward the voters, I mean, I think it would have to be substantial enough to make a difference, but not overly. Yeah, but like you said, when we took the max about the emergency responder levy, they went right for it. So gosh, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure what to say about what the option should be that we would present to the voters. I'd like to hear more talk about that. But another thing that I was really kind of looking at with all these maps, and I'm going to just ask a really dumb question. How much of these, shared use pathways and stuff like that, how much of those are going off into the county, or is it all in city limits?
A lot of the projects are in the county, but you realize it was part of the transportation plan and connecting not only, so really this assessment only apply within city limits, but the plan would be much larger than that, as we grow outside of city limits, but also if the county were to have some projects as well.
Because I'm super reticent to just, assess anyone in Kalispell for anything that's outside of city limits, since there's a moratorium on sidewalks for the county. So I don't want to, be funding anything unless it's in the city. And I know that might sound a little harsh, but I think that if there's going to be, money being put up on the table, then I think that everyone kind of needs to put some money on the table then.
Yeah, I don't think it's harsh at all, council member. And in fact, the one thing I'd say is there could be no shortage of projects within city limits for the use of the funds.
I'm sure. It's just something that I thought about, and, I just wouldn't want to rub someone or me myself the wrong way, like putting money out in the county for shared use pathway. As much as I love all of them, I think that we need to be funding. If we're asking for funding from the city, then it needs to stay in the city. Thank you.
Ms. Gabriel?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm kind of in the camp of I don't know which option I prefer at this point, but while I appreciate what Mr. Hunter said and really appreciate his enthusiasm for improving the trails and all of that, and I get all of that. I'm struggling with, the emergency responder levy passed because every single citizen within the city limits benefited. That was a very different levy and campaign. That was personal safety that benefited everybody from age 6 months up to age 100. This is only going to benefit people who either walk or bike. It is not going to benefit senior citizens that are not, using the trails and the sidewalks. My entire subdivision is one of those that has no sidewalks. I would love nothing more than to have sidewalks, because I have to constantly jump up on somebody's lawn every time a car comes by. So while I would love it personally and would use them, I don't know how I would sell that to my 85-year-old neighbors. I just don't see this being one that would pass like the safety levy. So I don't know what the timing magic is going to be. I 100% agree this has to be done. And just so you know, Mr. Hunter, we've been talking about this since I came on council in 2003 and adding sidewalks all over Kalispell. We had Mr. Safarud, who made that his mission to get those done, and Mr. Hafferman and a number of other folks really wanted to get those done. So it's been a priority for a long time, but I don't know how we could. I don't know how we could get that passed at this point. I don't want to be negative Nancy here, and I don't mean to be. I just think this is going to be a very hard sell.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that it's been considered since 2003 is a good argument as why we need to really get this done and move forward with it. And I'd also say that senior citizens actually have a very strong interest. Once you get to a point where you're no longer able to drive, path networks are very important. And, I do see seniors out there using our path networks, sidewalks and whatnot. But it's also, why I mentioned the traffic calming, because I do know that there are some folks that don't do any walking, but there are folks who may not do any walking, but still don't like the kind of the speed and the traffic on their residential roads, and would very much like some traffic calming to reduce that. We talked about what was it, East Oregon, up there, as one of the examples. But what I'd like to see is using maybe the Main Street Safety Plan as kind of a basis because I don't really know where to go with these numbers, kind of what the sweet spot is. I think those three things funding, if we went back and kind of looked at these numbers and said, if we funded these three things, and then looked at the Main Street Safety Plan, said, what would get us where we could fund some good, substantive stuff, that would serve as good match for some of these projects, and kind of use that as a way to get to a number that makes sense. Because obviously we want to keep it as low as possible that is likely to win some support and get the votes to get funding, but not so low that you're not really making meaningful progress on, putting those pieces in place to, over time get somewhere meaningful in terms of building out a network. So that's why I think maybe that Main Street Safety Plan would be a good tool to kind of get us at a number that makes sense.
I mean, I understand all these different positions, but like Miss Gabriel, the EMS levy was really done because everybody can picture themselves calling 911 and needing that service immediately and having that service homogeneous. And I understand your Main Street. I mean, okay, great. Let's go to the general populace and say we want to levy this and use the Main Street safety, this area. You're gonna have a lot of people, dare I say, going, what's in it for me? And much like years ago in a forum, when I asked Mr. Regier, like to have this as an option. Well, why would we ever do that or allow you to do that from the legislature? Because I don't want to pay that. I'd rather come in and use your infrastructure for free. So that's the attitude of elected officials that reside out in the county that represent certain sectors of our community. Looking at this, I really liken this to what happens with the schools. We see school levy after school levy fail, and a lot of times what I hear is, I don't have any more kids. Why do I want to pay it? Understanding that education is critical for the long-term viability of any organized society. But when we lose that nexus, that immediate feel of use or benefit, it's a lot harder to sell. And so that's where I look at these numbers and I keep going down and I go, okay, over 10 years, I can do 25 miles. If I do the max, I can build 25 miles of sidewalk. Okay, where? And that kind of gets to your point, Mr. Hunter. Where do we prioritize? How do we lay it out? I mean, I could see if you could lay this out and say, this is the network we're going to do, but we have to factor in inflation, I'd assume, Mr. Russell?
Well, yeah, really what you do is you take the transportation plan, combine it with the Main Street Action Plan and look, okay, what would the planned effort be? I mean, the initial discussions that we've always had is, okay, you factor on those high priority areas, which were identified in the transportation plan, around schools, around major connections, and lay it out from there. And, that committee would come up with that components of, okay, here's where you'd start, and basically go on down the line related to it. So those things would come in terms of taking it out and what that impact would be if, council wants to go through. And maybe what what option is to start those discussions with the committee.
Right.
In advance.
Well, and I think that might be part of this. I mean, right now, we kind of got the cart before the horse. It's we have the plan. Let's hit the priority list. Okay, what are the numbers? And then then you can say, okay, does 664, does 400? What amount funds that if we bond it? Just to see how realistic is this and how much can we get done? Because that's the picture you really need to paint for the public. Not, it's just $40 a month or a year on my taxes.
So I'm just thinking, for some reason, I seem to remember a few years ago that we talked about sidewalks and we gave kind of a swag of how much that would cost for sidewalks. I seem to remember the number 12 million. Does that sound familiar?
I think I recall what you're referencing, but it was just the amount of unfilled in
Correct.
connections across,
Correct.
and I,
So not-
I don't have that offhand.
Right.
You know, the reality of it is it was a big number.
Oh, yeah.
There's no doubt about it. You know, something of this, which is why, you know, presented in this fashion is, you know, sometimes it's incremental changes that lead to the impact later on down the future.
That's
You know, if you had this 20 years ago,
right.
you know, then you'd be looking at, you know, potentially 40 to 50 blocks done.
We would have just gotten the last chunk of sidewalk done last year. Did the math just now.
I don't think we would have made that much difference.
Off these numbers, right? Just going off of the 12, not any traffic calming, not anything else, just strictly sidewalks. I came out at 18 years for 0.46 that it would take us to do just the sidewalks we're missing. Almost 20 years. So I appreciate this, and I totally agree with you, you know, with everybody's comments, really. But with the emergency levy plan, with the rates that we've had to go up on different areas, and moving into really uncertainty in the next year or two, I would have a really hard time moving forward with this. Just my thoughts.
Your Honor.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Gabriel.
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with what Councilman Nunnally just said. However, I don't think there's anything wrong with having a committee meet, prioritizing, and being ready to go, or closer to being ready to go when we figure out that timing. I don't want to see this thing stuck on a shelf and gathering dust and not being talked about. I think it's really important to talk about it and do the prioritizing. I just don't want to see us jump out and ask for a bond at this point. I wanted to make that clarity with my comments.
Well,
Thank you.
that's a good way to say that, because I could see me supporting that too. At least have the discussions.
Ms. Dahlman, were you trying to jump into?
Yes, thank you. All right, well, my goodness, I can see where everyone's coming from. I would probably lean more in support of this just because, you know, I think that having multimodal is good for everyone, the health of our community, and lots of other things. But really the question is, like, if we're going to put this before the voters, how much is it going to cost us in our budget? And, you know, I agree with, you know, getting a committee together and kind of laying things out a little bit better. But if we were to decide to bring this to the voters, how much would it cost us and when would we do it?
So your first question, how much would it cost? What do you mean by that?
Well, if we're going to put it on the ballot, I mean, that costs money.
Oh, so you figure around 25,000 for an election.
And then timing,
Be whenever council would want to do it. Just need about 90 days in advance to put it on a special election. And same thing with if you're going to put it on a general or a primary, just need it 90 days in advance.
okay.
But the
Thank you.
25,000 does not include what we did with the EMS levy, which is kind of the public awareness.
Yeah, yep, that'd be separate, that'd be up for council deliberation, and, you know, the 100,000 seemed to work really well, and I think we ended up right around maybe 75, 80? 82. So, yeah, just to put it in perspective of what that educational campaign was, so.
I mean, I think that worked really well, and obviously, you know, if we're want a positive outcome for it, we gotta educate the public about why we're doing it, and you know, and so I would think that would have to be a component to it. You know, and I hear the argument about it take 18 years or whatever to. Well, imagine if we started that 18 years ago, where we would be. I see it as an argument to start now rather than wait years longer for that perfect opportunity that's, I think, probably never going to come. Let's get started now. Unfortunately, we do not have a funding source where we can just come out and build all this stuff out. It's going to be something where we're going to have to do it in very small chunks over time. Unless, there's a rainfall coming from federal government or state government, which is always a possibility when we saw with infrastructure funding. But, I think, move forward now because there is no good time, and do it a little bit over time. And 20 years from now, people will look back and say, boy, I'm glad council had the vision then to do this, because look what we've done.
I can understand that, Mr. Hunter, but I also want to be able to tell the voters what they're getting. It almost sounds a little bit like pass it and then we'll let you know what you got.
But we have the transportation plan that has the plan.
That's what I'm
We
saying.
have something to show
That's what
them.
I'm saying. Let's
Yeah.
prioritize it.
Oh,
Let's say,
absolutely.
what do we want it, and I'd
Yeah.
rather come from that approach versus jumping right out and then go, well, Mayor, what are we going to get for the money? Well, we're still working on that.
No, I totally agree with your previous comment that let's go to the transportation plan and kind of work out and say, okay, rather than, kind of the approach maybe as I see this, which was, what's a number that's palpable? Let's see what's the number we need and keep it as low as possible. And in terms of funding those priorities, that makes meaningful progress. I totally agree with what your point was. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I'd point out that this table is just for discussion purposes to start it, not a, hey, what option do you want to choose to go out to the voters?
Right.
I think you're all exactly correct. And I think the transportation plan lists out those priority areas, and we can go back to them and look at them, give an estimated cost, give an estimated timeline. There's going to be different options of funding it. Again, the pay as you go or the pay as you use format. When pay as you use, you bond it out. And maybe you want to do a big section of sidewalk and curb and gutter on one stretch where you bond that out and has a component, and then you reserve some back for potentially fill-in projects if we're out doing work that you can fill in that as well. And maybe you adjust the percentages to shift it more one way or the other, or you add in, create this is more of a traffic or a pedestrian safety assessment to where you have trails, sidewalks, and traffic calming within the streets. So yeah, this is just a start to potentially lead to some of those further answers.
Other thoughts? Committee for,
Yeah, the only thing, if we want to set up a committee, start looking at it, the only thing it's going to cost us is time. So that's, like I said, I think that's, the discussion we heard is that, some more specifics in terms of what projects could be, and we can outline, a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year plan potentially of what that could be, and start looking at those numbers at a higher level.
I think that would be the prudent avenue. So,
I just need a few volunteers.
well, I know one. I know two, actually.
Yep.
That was a don't put me on the committee, not a put me on the committee.
Who else?
I'll get back to you on it.
Get back to me on it.
I'll get back to you.
Ms. Dahlman, Ms. Gabriel?
Did you say do you want to be on it?
Get
No.
back to you.
Oh.
on it. Your Honor,
I'll be the devil's advocate.
may I ask a silly question? I'm thinking about the special lighting district we had with the, specific assessment for that district. Would we ever consider a sidewalk special district? Per neighborhood or anything like that? Is that,
So the lighting district is citywide.
okay?
This would be a citywide district, affecting all parcels. You could do a regional special improvement district.
That- okay,
That
that's-
is a specific, that option's available right now if you have, homeowners in a neighborhood that want it. That's the model to set up for, a specific improvement for that respective area. as we had the initial discussions on a citywide, that's why you'd have the variety of different components in it. Not only sidewalks, but also portion for replacement, to add for the 50/50 program, portion for trail connectivity, something that also, has a citywide benefit component to it, so. But any neighborhood could come forward with a special improvement district request. And, currently, as how our ordinance is written, it's the responsibility of the homeowner to put those in. Council could actually enact that and require a special improvement district or require homeowners to put them in. This is just a different way of looking at that in terms of creating more of a citywide effort to fill in some of those connections.
Thank you.
So currently, the voters can already vote to do an SID for this, so that almost tells me that vote right there, that they haven't. Or is it just that we haven't advertised it enough in the communities?
Someone who's willing to organize.
Champion it.
Champion it. And
Okay,
And you'd probably see it really at the block level. You're probably not going to see a square area of 4 blocks because they're probably going to be concerned about theirs or a connection to some specific area. Just from the outside looking at it, it'd probably be hard to generate support within a neighborhood for a special improvement district.
okay.
Just looking at it from a little bit of a higher level.
okay.
And as I've spoken to in the past, I think it's a fairness issue in terms of how we fund things that, with streets, it's a community-wide problem. We come in, we fund it, we, fill potholes and stuff. We're not asking neighbors to organize a improvement district to fill the potholes on the streets. It's a fairness issue. This is critical part of infrastructure, and should be treated like any other part of our infrastructure and be citywide, something that we fund and take care of.
so
Well, I've got one.
I didn't hear anyone on Zoom. I think I heard someone say from Greece, yes, I'll do it.
Did both council members Fisher and Graham
I think
volunteer?
Mr. Fisher and Mr. Graham just volunteered. Perfect. I'll let them know they've been assigned. They volunteered.
I just don't have time right now. It's too hard for me to get into town to do something. So right now, I don't think I can commit to that. So if someone else wants to jump in, that'd be awesome. And I'll try and do the next one.
I do know Trails was part of Jed's,
That's, yeah.
Right?
I'm thinking-
Exactly. He'd probably be all over that.
We could finish getting volunteers or assignments, at the next meeting, have people have some time to think about it. It's one of those things where, a lot of these start off with initial discussions and, a 2-3 week thing isn't going to destroy timing on it,
Right.
depending on any of those things. So we can definitely wait till, a future meeting to finish off the assignments. But it would be nice to have 3 members of the council on that subcommittee. And, those are things we would note and we would keep, minutes of and have them publicly noticed, but with the involvement of council members. But I think it'd be valuable because you can already see some of the discussion points. And so I think it'd be good from that perspective to have a good section of the council ideas in the initial phases of that. So that's something we can definitely finish off those whoever wants to be on the committee, the next meeting or meeting thereafter, and go from there.
Okay. Anything else on this?
Okay.
It's only 1:45. We've still got 3 hours.
I told Mom I wouldn't be
Mr.
home till
Fredheim, that
midnight.
is not an
Stop
invitation to
it.
take 2 hours. Okay, public comment. Anyone wishing to give public comment, please step forward, state your name, and give your council comments.
Evening, Council. My name is Jaden Weppel, resident of West Kalispell. Live right off of Meridian and 4th Street. I live on 4th Street, which is a very busy road without any way to get into town except to drive there, which is no surprise to folks, right? I would support council moving forward with forming a committee or subcommittee to further identify possible priority projects that you might take in front of the city to possibly take a vote on that at some time. I grew up just off of Helena Flats Road. At the time I was living there, they put in a pretty substantial bike lane or shared use path that went up from about to Camelot Park over to Helena Flats School and then down to the Fritz Corn Maze. That's about as far as you could go, which really opened up so many things. And yet at the same time, that's also as far as you can go. As a kid, it was great to be able to meet with my friends, go to school, but also there was those gaps in getting to, onto LaSalle to enjoy, whether to enjoy any of the businesses that might have been out there, to go up to Goodwill, to go shopping, to go get, some food at Little Caesars or, Foley or what have you. And so I think that, especially as the mayor pointed out, that it's hard to sell something to people who don't necessarily know what it is like they're getting into, and as well with Councilor Gabriel's comments, how do you sell this to your 85 or to older folks in the community? And I think that a part of that would really come down to the work that this committee might be able to do in envisioning what that can look like. It's really hard to imagine, how you get around in the piecemeal network that we sometimes have here, even on 4th Street where I live now. If I want to get to the fairgrounds, there are points along Meridian where the sidewalk stops. I get to go hang out either I get to walk through the Ace parking lot, or I get to walk, by the Alano Club or what have you to get where I'm trying to go. And so I think that envisioning some of those ways that we can have a more connected system that itself really makes use of the money we've already invested in the sidewalks and opportunities that we have. I think that a committee looking at this would be of a great benefit to the city, and I would be in support of that. And thank you for identifying this as something that could use a little bit more, eyes on it in your last budget meeting, and I think it was August, and hopefully looking forward, looking at it in the future as well. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Anyone online?
Would you like to provide public comment online? Please raise your hand if so. Nope.
Any other comment?
I know I was specifically asked not to.
No, I didn't say don't.
Okay, I'll try and stay under three minutes. So I was actually just given blood, and I was up in that Meridian area that he was talking about, so I can confirm there are those gaps in the sidewalk, and and there's not a lot of tree cover up there either, so it can be a pretty harrowing experience walking back. But I was going to say, I know there's a lot of people I've talked to that, have just brought up to me that, we want sidewalks, all the way there, but also, down by Woodland Park, for instance, there's some, I know that goes into the county jurisdiction, but even the parts that are within the city, there's some areas where people have kids or they're really concerned about the corners. And I'd also say near where I live. So I live on 249th Street. I realize I should state that for the record. And there's some houses where there'll be a house and it'll have a sidewalk. It'll have one out to the curb, and it'll have one parallel to the curb, and it just stops on either side. And, essentially that's, it's a sunk cost has been invested in building that sidewalk, but then it's not useful, especially in the winter when you get to the end and it's like a foot of snow and you have to decide, do I walk over that or do I backtrack out to the street and go around? So I think in a way, if it's possible to fill in some of those gaps, you could be getting more for your money than you're putting in. You might put in, 50 feet of sidewalk, but you're essentially getting 100 feet of sidewalk, if that makes sense. And I think the other thing I'd say, I know there's concerns about the levy passing, and you mentioned the schools. So I am a teacher, and I can tell you a little bit about the school levy. The big danger for Kalispell is that the elementary levies can pass because that's just people in the city and immediately around the city voting. It's the high school levies have consistently failed, and that's because you have all those rural districts, most of them very poor, can't even pass a levy in their own district, and they are included. So that particular issue isn't an issue. And then one other thing I know that the the school district does is they get funding from private sources to do the voter education for the campaign. So all those levy signs, please vote, those are paid for, be paid for by the Kalispell Education Foundation or something. So if the city could find a sponsor, that could potentially mitigate that cost. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment? Mr. Rigg? Welcome to the 10th man. Good to see you again. So, Mr. Russell, city manager report.
Yeah, just briefly, only a couple of items. Next Monday is a fifth Monday meeting, so currently do not have anything scheduled for that. So it'd be the next regular meeting in August. The next time we meet, update on BNSF, got a buy-sell again. But they're ready for it to be signed with the application fee. We just have to finish the phase 2 and make sure nothing pops up in that, but at least we are that next step closer. There was an article in the Beacon related to that park project, and we're continuing to work with our partners with the Bibblers, and hope to at some point come back to council with an MOU related to just the general concept as we move forward with that and what that would look like, which would help us in some of their planning, because I know they're looking at doing some stuff in the fall for outreach and stuff, so it'd be nice if we could wrap up a MOU. So more on that to come, but we are still making progress on that project, and that's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Russell. Anything from council?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. A couple of things. One, just follow up on that conversation. A question on the subcommittee. Is it possible to have community members involved, like somebody from the school district, some folks, biking groups, or folks that might have an interest in trail sidewalks, traffic calming, to participate in subcommittee?
I would say that may not be a bad idea. It may start off good to get, our committee together first and maybe meet and have that discussion of broadening, especially if you're looking for potential, supporters and people involved that have that interest, or even a detraction from it. It's not bad to have multiple viewpoints. But I think to start off, you may just want to start off with where we're at, what we envision, and then if we need to broaden it out from future.
Yeah, because if we did go for a levy, it's good to have that buy-in from stakeholders. So, and then the second thing, we have received complaints about the conditions of the Outlaw Inn, and I have seen it. There is a lot of trash. There's a lot of weeds, and we kind of have absentee owners. I'm wondering if we can have that declared a nuisance and push the owners to try to clean up that property and at least take care of the weeds and some of the trash that's accumulated there.
Yeah, so as we've stated before, our nuisance laws are not very strong. And we're happy to do a rewrite if council wants to do it, but you have to be prepared for application citywide. But along that, I think Jared can probably add some information related to it.
Yeah, so the project's been delayed for a bit of time, but we have been in contact with the owner, especially, and we have passed on some of the complaints. Usually that can be the most effective, is just letting them know that there's even some issues out there, right? So we have been told that the project is going to happen in phases, that there'll be some building permits submitted here within the next 2 weeks or here early August for the next phases. And you likely may even see some demo happening on site that actually doesn't require building permits. So hopefully that would mean that just having activity on site and having some construction going on would, keep some people out of there. But yeah, as far as just weeds, we actually don't have a weeds ordinance. We have tall grass for a fire hazard, which we are getting into the fire season, so potentially we can handle that. But they actually been aware, and you may even see some weeds and things being cut down here in the next couple weeks. But with that being said, We haven't started any enforcement action, and these are just conversations we've had, and things could change. But, we do foresee some things moving forward here in the next couple weeks. So if things don't change here in another month or so, maybe we could talk again, so.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Anything else from council?
I got my hand up.
Okay. Oh, you
Yeah, I do. I actually was gonna bring up the very same thing, the outlaw CUP. There's been, some complaints about that. And was there not some promises made about fencing being, put up around that in the interim before they did building? Was that something that was promised to us when we had made, the conditional use permit for them, and we had expressed some concerns about this possibly happening? Or am I imagining that?
I don't have the conditions before me, but I believe that the fencing is just a security measure for them at this point. It wasn't a condition that went on the CUP. It became a security measure. However, there is a lot of improvements that you got to remember, there was issues with this building before they went away, so let's not forget that. This will actually be a complete reuse of the property and converting it into housing, which then requires a lot of public improvements. Third Avenue East would be improved in accordance with this project. Those log cabins were going to be removed, so I think that may be what you're referencing, the dilapidated cabins that are there, and the thought that they would be removed. But no, there was never any requirement of fencing, and we haven't typically done anything like that in the past. So it's just a security measure that they would be putting up in order to protect the site.
Yeah, I think that that's what I'm referencing. Like, I don't think that this was a condition of the permit, but it was something that was mentioned during those meetings that they would put fencing up, it would be secure, and it's no longer secure. And I think it needs some attention. I'm glad to hear that, there's been some discussion with the owners, and I'm sorry to hear about the delays, but it's needing some attention. So good to hear. I look forward to hearing more about this as the weeks go on. And then just for clarification purposes, so we've got the Parkline Trail that goes to the rails to trails underneath that area where the railroad tracks are over there on the very west side. We've been getting a lot of complaints about that area. Is that something that is part of that BNSF purchase? But there seems to be a lot of complaints about that kind of turn and the trail and the trestle and everything. Is there any, possible solution or comment about that?
Well, so right now, all that is in the county. So it's outside of municipal jurisdiction. On acquisition, we would propose annexing that into the city, and then we can engage in potential cleanup activity or respective enforcement of any type of activity that's in violation of law. But right now, it's all out in the county.
Okay, so that's in the county. All right. Good to know. I appreciate the clarification. That is all. Thank you so much.
But it is part of that White Track property in the county.
Yeah, correct. That would be, the property would be acquired. And the Rails to Trails actually sits on an easement that actually belongs to Flathead County. So, they don't own the property, but they have the easement on the Rails to Trails. The property itself right now is owned by Burlington Northern, but that would be part of the acquisition.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Gabriel, do you have your hand up?
Yes, I do. Thank you. I've got a few things here. Thank you to Councilman Dahlman. I also had that question about the trestle and the trails, and not as to who's responsible for it, but are we getting back to folks that email about those and let them know that? when they write in. The person who wrote in this last week had a pretty extensive letter, and I'm just wondering, do staff get back to those folks and let them know that that's in the county and not in the city at this point?
We share that information. I know that there was a follow-up email from Rails to Trails directly answering that same question. So we did not duplicate an answer to it
Right.
because that was provided.
That's okay. Yeah, as long as they get the clarification, that I'm happy with that. Second, thank you to Mr. Hunter for bringing up the outlaw. I've been wondering the same thing, and as we're talking to those folks, they may be aware that people are sneaking in there and living in there, but if there's demo work happening, we might want to reiterate that there are human beings going in and out of there on a regular basis. It is a mess. I purposely don't drive that road because it is such a mess. So hopefully the work will improve that here soon. Next thing was, I don't want anyone to discount the importance of the topic tonight in my comments. I'm not discounting that it's important. I'm simply making a comment that I don't think people are going to find it as important as the EMS levy. I think it's very important for connectivity, for all sorts of reasons, for kids in particular, to be able to walk safely. And Mr. Hunter is spot on as, promoting this when it comes to that time, to promote it as a safety issue. So I just wanted to make sure, I don't know if there's media there or not, but I wanted everyone clear that I find it's important. I just don't see the way to put it forth right now. There are weeds on that new Meridian apartment complex that are as tall as I am, that just opened up not too long ago. And in light of Mr. Nygren's comments that we don't really have a lot of meat in that ordinance where we can and do a lot with nuisance and weeds, I would like to request that we revisit that and perhaps figure out how to put a little more beef in that ordinance, because it's nuts to see weeds that tall in a brand new area. And maybe they're going to address it. I don't know. And then last, I just want to say congratulations to Mr. Fisher on his wedding this weekend. And that is all. Thank you.
I can address June grass real quick.
Okay, go ahead.
Because we did get a complaint on that. So it's an ongoing construction project. So the phase, it's, I believe, about half occupied. And we did talk to the property management today. So hopefully you'll be seeing those weeds get cut down if they haven't been already. And also all the landscaping, all that area will be landscaped. It's been bonded for, it just hasn't been installed. So you'll be seeing the actual improved landscaping going in here within the next couple weeks as well. So
Thank you.
And as a follow-up in terms of the nuisance, like I say, not only could our ordinances be stronger, but also the resources it takes to have a good enforcement program in place, because we don't have a code enforcement officer. We do everything by complaint. Sometimes you see a rash of complaints come in and we follow up on them, but it takes time because we don't have dedicated resources. So I just put that out. That's something also for council to consider when it starts looking at code enforcement activities. To have them managed at a singular point of source is the effective and efficient way, which is another thing that we just don't have. So in addition to a potential rewrite of ordinance, which we're happy to have that discussion, maybe we put that into, part of the work plan for council's discussion this fall about what that could look like in potential rewrites. But also then, when we get into fiscal year 26 budget discussions, if we don't want to go that direction, we could really use some dedicated resources, because it is a time-intensive process, following up on letters, and then the next step, and the next step, and then going to enforcement action and activity. So there's multiple components that we've had general discussions in the past and just haven't gotten very far. But as we get these, people want to see action related to them. And not only does it take probably a little bit better ordinances, but also additional resources to relate and put forth to them.
Yeah, and the outlaw end, for example, would require, there is some potential nuisance with trash and things, but most of it would be property maintenance code, which we don't have. We don't regulate the fact that something doesn't look good. You know, and the fencing has been put up for security measures, and that's why I forwarded on a lot of the emails, because the owner may not even know that some of the fencing's been knocked down and that things have happened, because they're paying for security to be looking over at the property too. So that's why it's good that we've been getting the complaints, so we could pass it on, so that they are aware that, you know, their asset as well, they don't want getting damaged, so.
Mr. Dowd's all over the code enforcement officer. I guess.
I was wondering if Mr. Klusner was over there somewhere.
He's hiding underneath the counter over there. Yes. Revisiting the, doesn't hurt to look at it. I mean,
I find with looking at kind of a different code, in terms of, or code enforcement officer, you know, and dedicating resources to a new hire there. You know, I heard a suggestion during the warning center discussion about having a housing and homelessness liaison staffer, and that would be a higher priority for me than a code enforcement officer. So I get it, you know, and perfect world, we'd have it, but I think I'd have higher priorities for a new staff person. That's just where I am. Willing to look at a code. I am a little bit reluctant of kind of the nanny state, you know, going after everybody. I maybe side with Sid on some of that stuff. You know, I think it's important, like outlaw stuff. There are times when it gets a little crazy and you're like, you know, something needs to be done. But at the same time, you have some communities that are just all over people for the smallest things, and I don't like that. So I'd have to look at the specific language and find that balance.
there's a reason I live in a very minimal HOA.
Is that the same code that has, that I could implement front yard gardens in? Or is that a different one?
That's all dependent on the policy council chooses to enact.
Okay.
If you'd like to create that in the landscaping ordinance, you are more than welcome to.
I will never live in a HOA community for that reason, so.
Yeah, and I can just think back to some of the conversations that we've had with some properties in town that have been extremely ugly, that have negatively impacted the neighboring properties. And therein lies that push and pull, so. Okay, well, maybe discuss.
Real quick question. I got one real quick question, if you don't mind, Your Honor, please.
Quick.
Does, off the top of your head, Mr. Russell, when was around the time when that outlaw CUP was?
I'm not
Do you
sure.
remember?
I can't remember off the bat. I want to say 20, 21?
Yeah, I'd be guessing it's all blurred when there was so many housing units that came through between 20 and 23. So I'm yeah, 21, 20, early 22, 21, somewhere in there. Thinking.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else? Any other quick questions? Anything burning? Two quick things. August 5th, a lot of times we'll have on the agenda committee, report, but we don't have anyone reporting. Bob Keenan, I talked to him last week, and he is presenting to Health and Human Services, I think Finance Committee, this week or next week. I think it's this week. But I'd like to see if he could come, if council be willing to have him come give an update on what he's learned, kind of leading the effort behind the Governor's Mental Health Committee response. Come give an update, what they're looking at, kind of. I think that would be good to get that information. So if council's open to that, I'd have Bob come in and do that. And then the last thing, I did meet with Mr. Flateau, I think it was Wednesday. It's all a blur. And talked with him. He's moving forward, and I've given him several names, contacts, and so hoping to see some progress out of that. But been communicating with him on a pretty regular basis, so just wanted to let council know that that didn't just end when he walked out the door, that there's still more happening with that, so. And that's all I have, Mr. Russell.
To, for that fifth with, Bob Keenan, do you have his contact?
Yeah.
And we'll
I'll
invite
give
him?
it to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, with that, we're adjourned.